Hello, everybody. I am Fukatsu from the Guild. Today, I'd like to speak to you under the title of How to Design Well-Aligned and Well-Oriented Services. First of all, we'd like to consider why services get distorted and disoriented during the operation. I will share my observation with you and discuss possible solutions. Now, let's start with our daily lives rather than getting right into the services. There are things that we take for granted in our daily lives, which we cannot put in practice in services operations. Maybe that's the reason why services get distorted. What do I mean by that? Well, as you cook anything or you make sauce, you would probably frequently taste it to make adjustments. But during the product development and service operations, you fail to do so. You just release your product in one go, sometimes even without adding flavor or testing. Something that you would do unintentionally in daily lives are not being done in services operations. When you take a trip to a place you've never been to, you would probably use Google Maps to frequently locate yourself so that you safely get to your destination. During the long-term projects, you should really have a bird's eye view of the milestones, just like you would take a look at the Google Maps and adjust the locations. Well, periodic adjustment should be the right thing to do. However, it seems like once something is decided, there is no other way to go. When you write a speech, like when you deliver a speech at your friend's wedding, you certainly would draft and draft again, but during the product operations, you may build the final product without prototyping. When you buy a dress, you would try many dresses on, but in the marketing research, you might not do that trials. So, we have this wisdom of doing pre-checks, frequent checks, and frequently adjust the way we go without even being aware of it. However, during the large-scale development, all the team members tend to forget about that, and they focus only on a single KPI or short-term goal, resulting in the distorted or misaligned resource allocation. What a pity. Now, during the daily lives, there may be times when you are misaligned or disoriented. In your health checkups, you do not focus only on blood glucose. Blood glucose alone will not tell you that you are safe or healthy. You may have problems with cholesterol or your hearts. I don't think you would do that. Now, in strength training, you don't focus only on biceps. When you do strength training, you probably work on abs and pecs. But in service designs, somehow OKRs distorted and ending up in just training your biceps. Or in your married life, you cannot measure that with the number of times you tell your partner, I love you. The married life should be an aggregate of something more subtle. However, in services, you might want to focus on two simplistic numbers like PVs and revenues and the number of downloads. So, the single focus is quite risky, and we know that from our daily lives. That's a part of our wisdom. Somewhat in a service works or a group works, we cannot put in practice what is really taken for granted in our daily lives. And maybe that's the reason why services get disoriented. But why can't we actually do it? Probably you might be able to have an educated guess at what I'm getting at from the previous examples. You use two simplistic index to maneuver your services. Collectively, mankind tend to rely on simpler things than complex, but a single value or a single number can only distort the services. Let's come back to this example of health checkups. We are talking about this complex system. You cannot evaluate that with a single index, like blood glucose or greater pectoral muscles. If you focus only on them, other factors can kill you. If you want to stay healthy, just like services, you have to have the periodic health checkups. You have to have a bird's eye view to make the holistic judgment. Otherwise, you will focus too much on this year's targets or end up technical debts with unbalanced development, or end up with those products or services which your users even do not like. So you may be bound by a single KPI, or you may be bound by the values of a single decision maker. So, whatever you do in services or in measures, business side, technical side, and creative side all have to offer their perspectives so that everything is covered. Simply put, this is diversity. We have business, tech, and creative, different jobs. But of course, diversity can be found in other factors like age, gender, ethnicity. For example, if the management team comprises only of old men, they may not understand what sort of challenges the younger and or female employees may have. So, the team or the top management should also have some diversity. So, I've been talking about the real-life examples. We really have to avoid relying on a single index like KPI. Qualitative and quantitative and comprehensive causal judgment have to be taken in order to avoid distortion. Whatever the decision that you're about to make, there must be multiple layers of consideration. So during your life, you would do drafting, you would do tasting, tryouts, but sometimes you're not able to do that because you are a part of the team which is focused on a single KPI. So what I suggest is to have 3 criteria of decision making, each to be reviewed and revisited by teams with diversity. Personally, I think it is important to look at the service from the qualitative perspective in terms of how it should be, and take the combination of multiple quantitative KPIs. And number 3, to understand the causal relationship of the service, to understand where you're responsible for. And these 3 factors are very important for you to stay aligned and well-oriented. So let me go into a bit of a detail of those 3 factors. Number 1, in qualitative space, The most important thing is the mission. The mission is a criterion of qualitative decision making. When you hear mission, you might think of your company's motto or catchphrase, but mission should be a very powerful tool for teams' operations. I often talk about mission as being something like Polaris. Just like you look at Polaris. If you confirm the mission, you know whether the measures are aligned. You understand the direction of the services. And if you can build that type of a mission, then be it users, teams, management, decision-making becomes smooth, even without precedence. You don't have to lose your way if you know what your mission is. For example, this is the mission of Note, a company that I help with, and this mission is enabling everyone to start and continue creation. This is a tool to align the entire team, and it is a symbol. Rather than having nice words to your ears, this mission makes it clear who is the target, what is the action, and what the ultimate goal is. So these components are embedded in this mission intentionally. So if you design your mission this way, as you build some features, you remember for whom you are building that feature and whether that feature helps them to start and continue whatever the action you would like to entice. If you have some fanciful mission like let your dreams fly or let the society shine, using those words, it'll be difficult to determine the directions of your company. So, as a tool, the mission should have the future directions and the processes to get there embedded. If everyone shares this mission, even if you have missed the specific adjustments of your roadmap, everyone is aligned to aim at the destination, just like the Polaris, so that teams would be able to get there independently. So the mission is positioned at the highest level in the company, and everything else are subordinates to the mission. For example, profitability is gasoline to get to the destination. Technology, design, and creative are the engines to get to the destination. Just like that. As you consider the mission at the center, you came to realize the profitability is not everything. You have to have the social benefits and corporate benefits, and you want to find where they overlap so that you can prevent your services to seek only profitability and seeks the way of an evil. Now, the second factor, that is something more specific. Quantitative data as neutral information. We are a startup, so we consider services from data. Now, there is a pitfall there, however. Data seem to be right all the time, but data can be distorted too. You shouldn't be complacent just by looking at the data, because it may be just blood glucose for your health, or maybe some pecs for your entire muscles. That'll be too simplistic. As you look at data, avoid focusing on a single simplistic issue. Various types of data have causal effects. Focusing on a single index is a way to failure. However, as we look at startups in Japan, they tend to focus only on a single KPI. In order to avoid distortion, what I suggest is to have a counter index to check the distortion together with KPI. So, not looking at a single number, but a couple of sub-numbers in a pair so that you can avoid distortion. Page view, PV, for example. In the media-related website, PV is often used as an important index, but if you just look at it, your services get misaligned. How? For example, if you just want to increase page views, your team may choose to use scandalous titles, intentionally misleading titles, some provocative words, and deceptive, some Instagrammable titles and content. So you end up the content which is quite empty. The titles contain lots of exclamation marks and question marks, and the services tend to get distorted. Most of the users realize that they are deceived and they will leave the website and will never come back. Therefore, your PV will not lead to essential growth.
Similarly, when delivering a service that uses PV as an advertising KPI, since the pressure to make the PV look as large as possible works, the page is divided and the distortion that one article becomes 8 pages or 10 pages is likely to occur. Looking at a single index like this will lead to the distortion, so what should we do? For example, in the case of PV, set the reading completion rate as a sub-index. If PV is growing, manage it in combination with the number that a viewer has finished reading this page. Managing it in this way will prevent passing KPI in case of unreasonable numbers growth, such as deceptive titles and page divisions. Thus, you can prevent distorted growth. Similarly, people tend to set the targets such as sales and downloads for that term, and if you simply look at the number of sales in this term, it gets distorted by showing ads to non-targets to let them download and install. Even if people install, they may quit immediately or they may come to LP but do not download. This is a failure. So the repeat ratio may be lowered because the users be dissatisfied. To avoid being caught up in such things, you need to see the download as well as return, and also the new users, and also the other KPIs to prevent the failure. And if you look at one index, the services tend to be distorted, but the biggest challenge is to each team, instead of showing the causal relationship, to enforce the goal. And if the goal is irrelevant to the causal relationship, that becomes very difficult. So the KPI is not to look at one number. So to the team, even if it's difficult for the team, to the management, there must be someone who look at the KPI comprehensively or by department rather than enforcing small numbers like in a closed room environment. Prevent enforcing them to achieve the goal, but need to have comprehensive KPIs or the pairs of KPIs, and the mission and the KPIs need to be connected. And how can we do that? There's a third factor. The comprehensive decision making, and we are recommended to make a model of causal relationship. And how can we create the causal relationship model? And if you depend too much on one single KPI, and if the team members do not see the overall picture of the services or the essence of the possible growth of the service, and if the team is driven to that way, the people tend to stick to a simple individual KPI, and people caught up on this. And in order to avoid being caught up in such things, you need a tool that gives you a bird's eye view of the whole thing. For example, the following figure shows a causal relationship of the service called Note that I am helping. People tend to create the tree-like KPI, but if you create the tree KPI, before creating the tree KPI, we recommend to make a causal relationship KPI. If it's a blog service, if more people write, then more contents. And if the contents increases, more readers. And if the readers increase, the ads or the sales of advertisement increases, and the distribution amount increases, and the ecosystem will be activated, and the number of authors will increase. And if the number of readers increases, the amount shared will increase. If the amount shared increases, the recognition increases, and as a result, the number of readers and authors increases. I think the tips to create a service that does not get distorted is to map first which KPI is connected to each KPI. In this way, the number of posted content should increase as the number of authors increase. You can set a KPI that clearly states that the causal relationship, the number of readers, should increase as the number of posted contents increases. If KPI with a solely causal relationship exists, you can identify issues such as the number of authors has increased, but if the content has not increased, there is something wrong with the interface of the posting screen, or there is a problem with onboarding, or maybe you brought authors from somewhere else. While guessing where it was distorted, you can make corrections while looking at the causal relationship of the service. Rather than looking at one single KPI, it is better to look at which KPI and which KPIs are connected to form your service. Same with the human analogy. Communities and services are made up of complex systems, just like human bodies. It is important to confirm which cause and effects are connected by line rather than looking at a single index. And in case of note, there is a big causal relationship and sub-causal relationship diagram, and contents are interesting, so user become interested, and then the user keeps reading and also writing. It is assumed that the cycle will keep running. By replacing KPIs in the causal relationship of such an ecosystem, we are creating a structure that does not bias the team to one simple number. I've talked about 3 factors, namely to make a solid decision-making and big mission, and make a KPI aligned to that mission. For KPIs, create an inverse index so that you do not pay attention to only one KPI. Map the causal structure of KPI of the entire service so that you can get a bird's eye view of the whole. Then I think you can prevent service distortion with high probability at the decision-making layer. Similarly, up to this point, I talked about a tool for the upper management or the team, but there is a tool for team members to create services that are not distorted. We recommend a simple tools such as sharing in picture story what happens to the services when we fail to achieve our vision. Since the vision is the other side of the service, you could say the other side of the mission. And you must share the to-be image, but also if you share the failing image, it makes it easier to fix the problem. Or when a problem occurs, you remember this is no good, so you have to fix it immediately. This is an example of the blog service fails. And I don't like ads appearing in spreads when I launch the article app. I don't like earning PV with divisions and scandals. I don't like articles being divided into multiple pages. Creating a negative image first and by sharing it within the team, similar functions and proposals will be difficult to pass. This is a deterrent effect. If you share the embarrassment and the point that the team and the management cannot compromise, it will be easier to share when there is no person in charge or in case of emergency. You might think we better fix it or we better stop it. Likewise, there is another way of preventing distortion. I think the qualitative statistical approach is also important. This is my own concept and may be rather unique. The idea of modeling and sampling various events on the assumption that the historically repeated events will occur many times in the same way in our service as well. Since common mistakes have been repeated many times in history, there are already solutions and preventions in many cases. The idea is to incorporate such things to service know-how. A structure for the collapse of the ecosystem, such as the collapse of civilization and why states declined, have appeared many times in history. It has been studied many times at the world level. Think about how this could happen to your service. For instance, let me see, it is possible to have an evil money-stealing system in a system. Why is it done, or what structure does it start to distort when various services are distorted due to vested interests? Or service users, developers, and operators should have supported new devices and new platform while changing generations. How did they fail to change generations, which prevented new generations to join? And all users formed a rigid small world of their own. We have seen such a thing repeated many times in the history, so I think it is important to model these things and put them on various services. Let me give you an easy to understand example that repeats historically. We don't have rankings because we concluded that blogging services shouldn't have rankings. The reason is that ranking is a predatory mechanism, that is, a mechanism in which the winner gets everything. This is because when ranked, PB is concentrated on the content at the top of the ranking, and the content collects more and more PBs. Writers also learn that if you write something like this, you can collect more PBs. This way, just creating a ranking, everyone will write similar articles, and the articles will be concentrated in one place, and articles often end up being designed specifically around hatred and scandals while reproducing each other's titles. So, if you look at past deprivation mechanism, you can design to eliminate distortion by eliminating rankings. It is important to eliminate deprivation behavior by eliminating the tendency of CGM to concentrate PB at the top of the ranking because many articles copy the bad role model at the top. I would like to I talked about some concrete example in the second half. Broadly speaking, the first basic is two simple numerical indicators are very easy to get distorted. However, when operating as a team, something that is easy to understand is necessary. So people fool themselves with one single KPI. Then you might have experience in your own life, such as I should have cooked the food while testing it, or I should have checked the map many times and corrected the direction walking the street. What you could otherwise do cannot be done. So my recommendation is to use various cognitive models and metaphors like cooking and muscle trainings, and also use mission qualitatively, checking the wrong failed direction as in the previous examples and correct it. Similarly, even unfounded qualitative methods can cause ambiguous strays. It is important to create a mechanism to analyze big data or take a bird's eye view of the data. And check it from the viewpoints of diversified teams and decision makers with such big missions and comprehensive information. See it from various perspectives such as business, tech, creative, race, gender, and age. And if you cannot make a decision, go back to the original mission. It's best to go back and see if it's aligned with the mission and run the causal relationship cycle. Again, of course, the most important thing is to complete the mission, whether it's business, tech, creative, growth, or revenue. It is just the means to achieve the mission, so you should not be obsessed with the means. Since the service becomes meaningful only by achieving corporate profits while achieving social profits, I think the most important thing is to achieve these two circles firmly. Achieving only social benefits will result in unsustainable volunteers and will shrink in a year or two. If you only achieve corporate profits, you will be just collecting money. You might rather buy bitcoins and stocks than trying hard to develop good services. I think it is not a good service design if it is too much biased to right, to the left. Everyone, when designing a service that does not get distorted, look at it from multiple perspectives rather than looking at a single number. Look at the overall balance or entire causal relationship. Taste little by little, correct the direction, and fix things as you usually do in your own life when you design services. Thank you very much.